When you're first looking for an affordable, Genta-inspired 70s design, the odds are you're going to go for two options, either the Christopher Ward 12 or the Tissot PRX. But the question remains, which one is better? Welcome back to the Chisholm Hunter channel. My name is Harrison, as always, and we are going to put these watches head to head, both the Christopher Ward 12 and the Tissot PRX, and see which one comes out on top, and see which one you should buy. Beginning with the case diameter of both of these watches, they are very similar. In fact, they're exactly the same. Both of them come in at 40mm in diameter. However, the Christopher Ward 12 wears considerably bigger, and I want you guys to bear that in mind, and that's partially due to the lug-to-lug. The lug-to-lug of the Tissot PRX Powermatic 80 comes in at 39.5mm. However, the lug-to-lug of the Christopher Ward 12 comes in at 44.5mm. And this makes it wear that little bit bigger, that little bit bulkier. And that's not a bad thing necessarily, but if you have smaller wrists, then you might see it as a bad thing. In my opinion, they both fit 6.5 inches pretty well, but if you maybe have 6 inches or slightly below, maybe Tissot's the better fit. When it comes to the height of a watch, that can make a huge impact on the wearability. And actually, I would say the Christopher Ward wears that little bit nicer, partially due to the height. It comes in at 9.95mm in height, if you will, and the Tissot PRX comes in at 10.9. So the Tissot PRX, although thin, is that little bit more chunky than the Christopher Ward 12. That's one point to Christopher Ward. Carrying on with this slightly chunkier theme from Christopher Ward, it actually comes in at 160 grams in weight, whereas the Tissot PRX comes in at about 138 grams. This is with all the links on the bracelet included. So you do get a little bit of a chunkier, heavier watch with the Christopher Ward 12. However, you're paying a lot more money. When you get to the case and the bracelet, let's just say that we're comparing apples for apples here. Let's say that we're both comparing the stainless steel variants. There's obviously a titanium Christopher Ward and there's a PVD gold Tissot. But let's just say we're comparing the steel variants. Both of these models have this beautiful angular 70s inspired bracelet, both with a butterfly clasp at the bottom. It's absolutely stunning for the money. But with a higher payment, you get more metal for your money. And as a result, the Christopher Ward's bracelet is a lot heavier and a lot more bulky than the Tissot PRX's. I can't really pick a winner here because price is such a huge factor. However, I do love the Christopher Ward's bracelet. Moving on to that dial, and guys, I almost feel bad here. I feel like I'm betraying my own Tissot PRX, but it's just good competition, isn't it? It's good content. Before we get onto the face of this watch, let's talk about those crown guards, because there's actually a huge difference between the Christopher Ward and the Tissot here. The Tissot has a pretty nice crown. It's pretty in proportion with the rest of the Tissot. However, on the Christopher Ward, you do have quite angular, quite elongated crown guards, and this gives it more of a kind of angular, futuristic feel. Now, to be honest, I think it might be a little bit too much for the Christopher Ward. Just in my personal opinion, I'd go with Tissot here. Moving on to the face of this watch, and this is where, in my opinion, Tissot stands out from Christopher Ward. Not in terms of finishing, but just in terms of design, in terms of the concept. I prefer the pattern, the gradient running through the dial on the Tissot PRX than the Christopher Ward. I'm not sure about the kind of pattern that Christopher Ward have used, whereas I do like the kind of waffle dial of the PRX. I think it's more generic. I think it fits more people. I would go for Tissot here. Before we go any further, we need to bring back an old tradition, I can never say that word, tradition, which is the Chisholm Hunter wrist check. What's on your wrist today? Please let me know in the comments, and while you're at it, if you could hit that subscribe button, I'd really appreciate it. With that said, then you get to the date window, and the date window on the Tissot PRX is at the 3 o'clock mark, whereas the Christopher Ward is at the 6 o'clock mark. And this is kind of where I lean towards the Christopher Ward. If you've been an OG subscriber, if you've been subscribed to the channel for a while, you'll know that I just have kind of a thing for 6 o'clock date windows. It makes the dial symmetrical. And as a photographer and videographer, that's what you look for. You look for proportions. You look for an image that's perfectly weighted. And to me, this weights the Christopher Ward well within the dial. The hands and the indices on the Christopher Ward 12 are a lot more angular in design than the Tissot PRX. With that said, I do feel the Tissot is actually easier to read, especially when you look at the Glacier Blue variant of the Christopher Ward 12. I just feel that Tissot have kind of nailed the readability aspect of the watch. And this is where we hit kind of a turning point in this video. In terms of style, in terms of aesthetic and build quality, yes, the Christopher Ward is that little bit better. However, with it being a little bit better in terms of build, the price is kind of reflective in that. But then you get to the movement, and for the price, Tissot knock Christopher Ward out the park, in my personal opinion. I'd love to know your personal opinion, but let's get into the details about both of these movements. The movement in the Christopher Ward 12 is the Sellita-based SW200-1, and it has a power reserve of 38 hours, 26 joules, and it has a date complication. It vibrates at approximately 28,800 VPH, and it has a time tolerance of about plus or minus 20 seconds a day. The movement on the Tissot PRX is the Powermatic 80.111, and this has 23 joules, has a diameter of 25.6, and has a power reserve of up to 80 hours. And included in that, you have a patented Vacheron balance spring that resists magnetic fields that little bit more than normal. Now, before we get onto the price of these models, let's just talk about what we just discussed. Christopher Ward don't hide their movements. They don't pretend that it's a Christopher Ward's own movement. They say it's mass-produced and it's a Sellita base, which I love. I love how transparent they are in their marketing. And I'm not crapping on Christopher Ward at all. They're a brilliant brand, and actually, I'm considering getting one. But for the price of £1,050 for the steel variant versus £610 for a better ETA movement with a higher power reserve, Tissot just totally win here. So who wins this video? You know, in versus videos, Harrison, I need to pick a winner. And it's hard because I have a Tissot PRX. I have loyalties to that brand, quite rightly too, because in terms of affordability, they're absolutely unbeatable. And that's the key there. In terms of affordability, Tissot are unbeatable. In terms of the movement, Tissots are better. In terms of the finishing, the Christopher Ward, because you're paying that much more, they do beat Tissot. But if you have a limited budget, my money would be in the Tissot PRX. Thank you guys so much for watching this versus video. Please let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree. I'd love to have that conversation. And I'll see you guys in a couple of days.